Saint Thomas Aquinas. Doctor of the Church and patron of Catholic schools. 1225 to 1274. Birth and early life. The 13th century was a time of extraordinary intellectual activity, which was not without its dangers. In the enthusiastic pursuit of learning, students flocked by thousands to the great universities, which, unhappily, were as often schools of infidelity as of faith. The philosophers of the age owned but one master, and he was a heathen. Aristotle, says Lacordaire, was taken to be the representative of wisdom. Unfortunately, Aristotle and the Gospel did not always agree, and many, entering on the unexplored sea of thought without a guide, made hopeless shipwreck of their faith. The great professors who were the oracles of the day were not always proof against the seductions of vanity, and sometimes tried to make themselves a name by striking out bold theories in matters where original speculation is seldom friendly to the faith. It was amidst the confusion of these new opinions that Saint Thomas Aquinas was given to the world to mark out the limits of Christian philosophy, and to form the separate materials of dogmatic, moral, and speculative theology into one grand and finished structure. Whilst at the same time he enriched the Church's liturgy with some of the most beautiful of its devotional formularies, and displayed in his life and character all the virtues and winning graces of a saint. Picturesquely situated in southern Italy on the top of a rugged cliff flanking a spur of the Apennines, and rushing waters of the Melfi, there stood in medieval times the fortress of Roccasecca. Here St. Thomas was born about the year 1225, authors are not agreed as to the precise date, and to the neighboring little town of Aquino he owed his surname of Aquinas. The Count, his father, was nephew to the Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, and on his mother's side, he was descended from the Norman barons who had conquered Sicily 2 centuries before. The Aquino family could claim relationship with Saint Gregory the Great, and was allied by blood to Saint Louis of France and Saint Ferdinand of Castile. The future vocation and sanctity of the little Thomas had been predicted to his mother, the Countess Theodora, by a holy hermit of the name of Bonus, and, whilst he was yet an infant, God's watchful providence over him was manifested in a striking manner. A terrific thunderstorm burst over the castle, and his nurse and his little sister were struck dead in the very chamber in which Thomas slept on unharmed. This circumstance accounts for the great fear of thunder and lightning which the saint is said to have had throughout life, which caused him often to take refuge in the church during a thunderstorm, even leaning his head against the tabernacle, so as to place himself as closely as possible under the protection of our Lord. Footnote. Hence the popular devotion to Saint Thomas as patron against thunderstorms and sudden death. Crosses are blessed against lightning, bearing on one side the image of the saint and on the other a Latin inscription, which he left traced on the wall of a cavern at Anagni, into which he more than once retired in a storm. And of which the following is a translation: "The cross to me is certain salvation. The cross is that which I ever adore. The cross of the Lord is with me. The cross is my refuge." The words Ave Maria were the first which his baby lips were heard to utter. Long before he could read, a book was discovered to be an unfailing means of drying his tears in all his childish woes. He would delight in handling it, turning over the leaves with infantine gravity. When only 5 years old, his education was begun by the monks of the celebrated Benedictine Abbey of Monte Cassino, which was only a few miles distant from Roccasecca. The monks found that their new pupil was a grave, quiet child, who loved to spend much of his time in the church, and was never without a book in his hand.